TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
What is an NFT? How can blockchain help producers get content funded and distributed? And what's it like producing a show with Werner Herzog? On this week's show, my guests are Cameron Chell, founder of blockchain businesses Currency Works and Vuele, and veteran Factual producer Richard Melman. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. Now, there's currently a lot of hype around NFT technology in the TV and movie industries, but what is it? Is it just a passing craze that could crash and burn any minute, or is it a long-term sustainable business opportunity for the content industry? Well, here to discuss this and more is my first guest on this week's show, Cameron Chell, founder of Currency Works and co-founder of Vuele, the direct-to-consumer content viewing and distribution platform. Welcome to TellyCast, Cameron.
Justin, thanks so much for having me. Love your show.
Thank you for joining me. I believe you're in Canada right now. You're speaking to us from Canada?
I am, yeah. Typically, we are based out of Los Angeles, but I'm up in Vancouver this week.
So NFTs, let's start right at the very beginning for the uninitiated in the content industry. What is an NFT?
Yeah, an NFT is basically, it's an address on a blockchain. And what that means is that the content that's associated with that address on the blockchain can have provenance, it can be unique. And what that really means is that you can create scarcity around it. You can also IP protect it. Those are the things that are really quite evolutionary for the whole content industry, because we can finally take digital content and put it in a format where we can create scarcity, where we can create uniqueness, and where we can protect that IP, thus ensuring the value of that content creation for the creator and for the people that own that IP.
It's almost like a digital fingerprint. It's absolutely unique and it's protected.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Okay. And it stands for non-fungible token, which whoever came up with that could have thought about maybe something a bit snappier, but there we are, non-fungible token.
That's a great point. You know, like the original, like so many things in technology and in this world where things evolve so quick and tech is moving at this pace that it is that, you know, the original notion of how a NFT was going to be used is now being used in a much different type of format and in an incredible way. So the idea that it's non-fungible is counterintuitive, because in fact, what's happening is you're taking this content and you're putting it in a format where it actually has value. So it is fungible in many respects. It is liquid. It does have value. But the original concept of what an NFT would be from a technical standpoint isn't what it's turned out to be.
Tell us about Currency Works and Vuele, and you founded both of those companies. Tell us how they work together as well. So first of all, Currency Works. What is Currency Works?
Sure. Currency Works is a blockchain, an enterprise-based blockchain that really focuses on organizations and companies that want to utilize blockchain technology for their enterprises, meaning more than anything is that they are compliant. So much of the blockchain work and the incredible work done in this space right now works outside of the regulatory environment. Much of the industry grew up really trying to work around banking regulations or work around regulatory constraints, not necessarily for nefarious reasons, but actually for reasons of better customer service or increased capabilities. The challenge that organizations have with that is that, you know, they already have banking rules, regulations, audit committees, all the things that are in place that provide the consumers or other businesses they deal with the protections or the trust platform in order for them to do business together. So with all the advantages of blockchain, you can't really unlock them if you're an enterprise in today's world because they work outside of the regulatory environment. So the blockchain that we have and the work that we do with the enterprise customers we have all has everything work within the current banking regulations and the KYC, the know your client, the AML rules and regulations, all the IP protections, everything that really makes the economy work. And this is the big differentiator for Currency Works over, say, other blockchains that are open source out there that are a little bit Wild West.
Right. We've heard the stories of, of people making just extraordinary amounts of money overnight on Ethereum and Bitcoin and various other currencies. So this is basically, so it's a business that essentially works within regulatory frameworks and gives people a certain amount of protection if they're investing in projects that you're involved with.
Yeah. So if an organization wants to, say, for example, launch a film and they want it on the blockchain, for example, and they want to do an NFT with it and such, you can do it on certain marketplaces out there, but there aren't IP protections. If somebody else wants to come and buy that particular movie or the NFT of that movie, there's no know your client rules, there's no banking regulations, there's no all of that type of stuff. And now the challenge with that is, if you can imagine a large studio, wanting to do NFT work or wanting to put their films on the blockchain or take advantage of all the amazing tech that's out there, they can't really do that because they cannot get into a situation where they have people buying these NFTs or trading NFTs or circumventing securities regulations or accepting money from nefarious actors and such. And so the whole blockchain and the market won't mainstream until we can get the larger organizations or the mainstream organizations in a position where they can actually transact on blockchains. And that's really our focus.
And so Vuele is perhaps a business that maybe a little bit more familiar to the content industry audience. But tell us about Vuele.
Yeah, so Vuele is a subsidiary of Currency Works, and we started it with a company called Enderby Entertainment. The concept being that an NFT platform is, in many respects, a fantastic platform to do actually film distribution, but to have the added features of digital collectibles and for the consumer to be able to actually own that particular movie or special versions of that movie. So imagine, if you will, Netflix, but instead of just getting a streaming service, paying your $12 a month or whatever it is and being able to watch this unlimited content, you're actually on Vuele able to purchase that special edition director's cut of that particular movie, early release, even red carpet release, all those types of things. And along with it, you get special outtakes or interviews, all of these pieces of content that will never be available in theater or on streaming that add to your digital collection. And you're part of a community that may be a super strong community or fan of Anthony Hopkins or of Pulp Fiction or, whatever particular movie series there is out there. And you can actually collect all those assets, just like we used to collect DVDs.
Right. Okay. And you created Vuele, as you say, as a joint venture, and this was to distribute Anthony Hopkins' Zero Contact movie, which is a bit of a game changer. Tell us about that.
The first movie that we're launching on Vuele, and we did a pre-release NFT with it, which was successful, is Anthony Hopkins' Zero Contact movie. And so this is a movie that was produced by Enderby Entertainment during the pandemic, done in an extremely unique way, and with an incredible cast involved and a great storyline. And so I'm not trying to give away too much, but at the end of the day, we did a release of 11 NFTs, very special cuts of the movie. And in fact, a number of those cuts, people actually, when they buy the NFTs, have the opportunity to be in the movie. And then the next versions that are being released here early in the new year are a version of the movie that will never be seen in theaters or on streaming, but you'll be able to have them on your Vuele account.
Right. So that's one of the first movies that's been produced with or through an NFT content creation and distribution approach. But what's the opportunity, the wider opportunity, I suppose, for content creators and NFTs? Many of our listeners are producers and also IP holders as well, who are kind of looking at this technology, and they're looking at Fox announcing that they're going to do some Masked Singer NFTs and various collectible pieces of almost like merchandising, if you like. But what about this creation and distribution? What do you think is the opportunity out there for factual content creators, for example, documentary makers? What's the opportunity for them?
What NFTs provide is an evolutionary and additional revenue stream for their distribution, and new revenue streams for collectors to actually own pieces of the story. So where we see things unfolding right now is that the NFT release of a movie is generally a premiere of the movie. So it's super early access. It's earlier than early access. And it's the people that really want to get their hands on this content early, and it's content that is unique. It also can be content that has, as mentioned before, interviews and outtakes and stuff that's just not included in a regular streaming or theatrical version of it. What it does for filmmakers and producers, in our view, is it gives them another outlet and another way to engage the fan. It gives them an opportunity to take all of the additional content that may never see the movie, but is really important part of the story or the development of the movie, or important to the fans of the directors or the actors of the movie, and gives them the opportunity to actually own a piece of that. The gamification around it. So in the case of Vuele, we released some crypto art quite early, which actually ties into the movie. And there's a whole game and a code breaking sequence that happens through the movie. And you can unlock additional NFTs and prizes and such, that if you're a super fan of the movie or of Sir Anthony Hopkins or of the directors or producers, this is the stuff that really immerses you more deeply into it. Then as that leads into gamification or into video games or into the metaverse, this is really that bridge between, kind of the traditional flat screen viewing and the immersive world of the metaverse that's coming up. And NFTs are really the key for that, both from a engagement and from a monetization standpoint for producers and directors.
So, for example, okay, so I do this on TellyCast fairly often, but with mixed results, I have to say. But let's say if I've got a documentary project idea, let's say, I don't know, it's an access-driven documentary to an archaeological project or a science or engineering show, something like that, not a movie. We're not talking about a multi-million-dollar project movie, but how should I be viewing the opportunity around NFTs to fund and distribute my documentary?
Well, I think there's several potential ways. And in the case of Vuele, we're pretty focused on the distribution and building that audience. But the creative means of what you can do with the NFTs and the campaigns that we create really are quite limitless. So, I mean, just literally off the top of my head, in the case of a documentary, you could be taking a number of the artifacts that are in that documentary, for example, if it's about a museum per se, and those can become NFTs. Unique views of them or special content that's created around that particular artifact with an interview of the curator or of the archaeologist, and done in a way that nobody, and just giving tidbits of information that really aren't available, or in-depth pieces of information that aren't really available to say that are in the documentary. That NFT could also give you access to the museum. It could act as your ticket to the museum or to a private showing, or to any number of special promotions or insights that people who are really engaged in that piece of content that want to get more immersed into that content. Those are just like right off the top of my head, a couple of the ideas. Now, listen, I don't think that there's a museum in the world 5 or 8 years from now that isn't going to have its own metaverse. And so being able to then, that NFT being able to give you special access into the digital metaverse of that museum, unlocking particular vaults or getting special access to see things that aren't yet quite on display, or early access to the next upcoming exhibition or such. These are all the, just right off the top of my head, the ways that museums or documentaries could use NFTs.
So producers should really be looking at this as not only creating the hour-long or feature-length special documentary, they should also really be thinking about, okay, how can we monetize the content in this project? And also, maybe there could be a crowdfunding element to this as well. So you could actually raise development costs through offering NFTs once you have the access to the show. And then that can help you fund the documentary. And then, as you say, there could be an early window, which could be another opportunity to monetize it before you even sell it, if you want to sell it to a National Geographic or whoever it is.
Yeah, one of the great things about NFTs is that they are unique content, so you can create a limited number of them. And so what that then means is you can have a trading platform. So if somebody gets an early access to an NFT, and there's a limited number of them. And then that film does very well, or that documentary gets very popular, or the subject matter becomes very topical. Other people and the general, public gets interested in it and wants to own that content. So now the content that you bought early potentially has a greater value later on. And so there's this whole notion now of the scarcity that's created by the blockchain actually creating value. And so, these are ways that people may buy NFTs up front in a movie to get those special pieces of content, maybe with the notion, certainly not on the promise, but maybe with the notion that that content has greater value later on. So if you could imagine a piece of Pulp Fiction, if I owned an original, outtake that there was only ever 4 of them released, and it became this classic cult movie, I was only one of 4 people or 200 people that ever owned that piece of content. Like any other piece of scarce collector or memorabilia, in theory, the value of that should go up.
Funnily enough, I was just watching some of the Ricky Gervais outtakes from After Hours, and he's famous for doing outtakes for all of his shows, Derek and various other shows that he's had over the years. And actually, first of all, they're super funny, but if they were offered as NFTs, then I can imagine that would be incredible. I think there'd be a real market for that. And I suppose that the key to this, isn't it, is really creating content for an audience of super fans, of maybe niche, really, really passionate fans of a particular subject or sport or whatever it might be, who want to be part of this project in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, I do think that that's key to making your NFTs very successful for a particular project. But in terms of the overall market for movie NFTs, it's as large as pretty much any market out there. If we think about sports leagues or what the NBA has done with Top Shot, because we're thinking about all of fandom here. We're thinking about all of film and TV, which if you think about that as a size of a league or an industry, it's absolutely massive. So I may not be an incredible super fan of a particular type of comedy, and so I don't really want to collect NFTs in that space. But I might be a fan of documentaries or of action films or dramas of some sort or whatever the case is. But the overall market, that doesn't mean that I won't go and buy an NFT in the comedy space because it has value and because it might be a classic. Collectors in all realms of the collecting world, tend to stick to their niche, but the overall market that they collect in is quite large. So, I certainly see this. I really, over the course of the next year to 18 months, I have a hard time imagining producers and filmmakers and the TV industry not considering NFTs as, kind of like that fourth arm of distribution or whatever the number, so you've got you've got theater and you've got streaming and you've got, home and you've got, whatever, but NFT will be, absolutely one of those categories. And it may look and feel a bit different, but it's got some big advantages and opportunities in it for the entire industry.
And now it's time for your story of the week, which is the TV industry news story that's caught your eye in the past 7 days. What's your story of the week?
Well, certainly the Quentin Tarantino releasing NFTs and then getting sued for it. To me, I think this is terribly interesting, because the studio is actually coming out and saying, oh, well, we were going to do NFTs around it, and Mr. Tarantino doesn't have the rights to do this, and all the rest of it. But I think this highlights 2 things. First of all, I think it highlights the potential and the recognition of the industry from heavyweights that are saying, hey, wait a minute, there's real value here, and we're going to start working in this NFT space. There's a way to engage with our customers. There's a way to create additional distribution. And so hence, there's a fight over the IP. At Vuele and at Currency Works, this is exactly the space that we work in. It's one thing to take a piece of content and just put it up there. But, probably the worst thing you can do is have success with it and then not have everything buttoned up behind it in terms of who owns the IP, who's going to earn the revenue, what are the fans' rights around it? The list goes on, and it can get incredibly complex. But again, I think that's one of the strategic differentiators that Currency Works brings to the table, is building an enterprise-based blockchain that actually solves these issues and works with all the players at hand to ensure that we actually get this content out in a protected manner to all those that want to see it. But I think it was incredibly bold on Tarantino's part to do it. I love that they did it. They pushed the envelope, and between him and the studio, they'll work it out in the back end. But I thought it was a fascinating story.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, more I think about it, just thinking about Star Wars, Star Wars NFTs. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? The potential out there. And for any producers out there who are working on these projects that have got really passionate fan base, it's a really, really interesting area that I know that we're going to return to on TellyCast. In the meantime, Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. I'll put a link to Vuele in the episode description so people can go on there and check your business out. And thank you again for joining us, and all the best with Zero Contact and Vuele.
Great. Thanks so much, Justin. Love your show, and congratulations on all the success.
Now, my next guest on this week's show is one of the industry's leading factual producers and former A&E Networks execs, where he was channel director for brands including History, Military History, Crime and Investigation Network, etc. He also spent 9 years at Spring Films, where he was managing director and exec producer on a number of leading factual projects, including the award-winning Prison series for Channel 4 and Werner Herzog projects, including Meeting Gorbachev and Into the Inferno. Welcome to the show, Richard Melman. How are you doing, Richard?
Thank you. I'm doing fine, thank you. How's things with you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's great to have you on, Richard. We had Andre on, I guess it was about a year ago, or around the last Real Screen, I think. Real Screen that was virtually happening anyway. So it's great to have you on. Now, you're no longer a managing director at Spring. So tell us what you're up to these days.
Well, I did 9 years at Spring, which I enjoyed enormously. And Andre and I produced a lot of good shows together, including, as you say, 3 films with Werner Herzog. Happy to show you the scars later, if you like. But that was a really interesting experience. Yeah, it was just one of those things. After 9 years, I felt I'd done as much as I could with the company, and I just wanted to go and take it a bit easier, look at a few other projects that I couldn't do within the company. And so told Andre I was off. And then immediately we got hit by COVID. Andre asked me to stay on and wait out COVID, which I was more than happy to do. So I actually left at the end of 2020, having sagely advised the Spring team in March 2020 that as we closed down the office, they should take everything they needed because we could be gone for 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, that was a year and a half ago. But things are slowly getting back to normal. I had 2 projects that we'd had commissioned whilst I was at Spring. One sequence of the Imperial War Museum for Channel 5 and another series for Channel 4 called The Defenders, which I wanted to see it to the end, and Andre was happy for me to do so, so I stayed on to finish those. And then whilst I was busy doing those, I got a very odd phone call in December last year from someone who said, "You don't know me, but I'm launching my own wine channel and I've been told you're the person to speak to." And I thought, okay, a bit suspicious. I've had many requests to help people launch channels over the years. His next sentence was, "Would you like to come down and see the 2 studios we're building in Pall Mall?" Which definitely got my interest. And I went down, and several glasses of wine later, we launched a 24/7 4K global wine channel where we make about 85% of the programs ourselves.
Wow.
So, yeah, my semi-retirement has been quite hard work, to be honest.
You've failed quite spectacularly at retirement, Richard, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'd take that on the chin.
And I imagine any time you get a call out the blue saying, "You don't know me, but," and it's like, oh, hang on, that's a bit worrying.
Yeah.
But
A lot of people have dreams. Grant Ashton, whose wine channel The Dream is one of those guys who just makes decisions and off we go and do it. So, which is rather wonderful working. The last person I worked with, quite like Grant, was actually Ted Turner back in when he was running CNN. And Ted would just say something and we'd all go and do it. It was wonderful.
Wow, yeah.
Occasionally say some things that we didn't really want to do, but we tried to avoid those.
Well, I can imagine as an experienced executive as you, after years in the business and making some amazing shows with Werner Herzog and some of the most talented directors and talent in the industry, the regular sort of commissioning process and waiting for all this to come through must get a bit, I don't know, tiresome, I suppose. Is that right? Do you look at it that way after obviously having run channels and launched channels yourself? Waiting for shows to get commissioned might be a bit tiresome.
I think it helps enormously. I was a commissioning editor for about 11 years because I launched what's now Sky Arts. We called it Arts World until the Sky bought us out. And then I went on to, as you say, run the History Channel, Biography Channel, and various others. I always have sympathy for commissioning editors because I always remember that someone comes to see you who you've never met before. They come up with an idea you're interested in. In a nutshell, you end up giving them a check for quite a large sum of money. They disappear, and 6 months later, they come back and show it to you. And the number of rough cuts I've gone to see as a commissioning editor, where if you got your fingers crossed, your toes crossed, you've done 4 Hail Marys in the taxi, hoping that it's going to be transmittable. So I do have sympathy with commissioning editors. But I have to say, I kind of like working with people who go, that's a good idea, let's do it.
Yes.
Back in the day, I know that makes me sound like a completely boring old fart, but there was a time when you would go into Channel 4 with 10 projects and they'd go, we'll do number 2 and we'll do number 7. When can we see a rough cut? And that was it. And that was rather glorious. And I kind of miss those days because now there's a lot of hoops and a lot of hurdles that you have to go through across the board with all the channels about proving that you're actually going to deliver something.
Yeah.
But I do have sympathy, I have to say.
Do you think it's more difficult to get a network commission now?
I do. I think there's more people trying for them. I think there's more commissioning editors are having to report up the chain of command. They don't have the autonomy that they once had. There used to be a point where once the commissioning editor said, yeah, it's a commission, that was it. You got it. And in fact, when I was a commissioning editor, people would come to me and say, well, what should we do? And I say, no, let's do it. We'll commission it. And they go, oh, that's fantastic. What do we do now? Do we have to take it to your board? I said, no, that's it. It's a commission. I send you a contract, you sign it, and I give you some money. And again, those days were, I suppose, the glory days. Now, everything seems to be by committee. And I find that, that does make me impatient, I have to say.
Yeah, I suppose there's many more layers now as well when it comes to, where the production company is actually geographically located as well, when it comes to sort of a nations and regions quota and various other quotas. I suppose that's a different layers. Interesting what you say about looking at things from a commissioning editor's perspective. I never really thought about that. Maybe we should do a show on that one day when I speak to some commissioned editors, because I suppose you're right, particularly if you're working with a producer for the first time, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I turned up once to a rough cut viewing and the producer was there and I said, oh, where's the director? And he went, oh, he had a bit of a nervous breakdown on the first day of shooting, so I took over. And I thought, and you didn't think that was worth mentioning to me, And I wouldn't have minded so much, except it was a terrible film. And we had to spend another week in the cutting room trying to get it back on track. So you really do. Your heart is in your mouth sometimes when you're working with newcomers. And particularly, I was always very keen on giving people their first break if I thought they were good. You just wanted them to deliver for you because I had a board I had to report to, and if they said, why did you spend that 6-figure sum on a show that got 0 ratings, you had to have a good excuse.
Yeah, well, no, it's something that we don't often think about. That's for another show. So just before we come on to talk about Secrets of the Imperial War Museum, which you mentioned earlier, just tell us a little bit about the Wine Channel then. So is that what it's called? It's just simply the Wine Channel? Or?
No, it's called 67palmal.tv. It's based on the Wine Club at 67 Pall Mall. And in fact, the studios are at 58 Pall Mall overlooking the Wine Club. And it is everything to do with wine. And when I took this up in January last year, I was thinking, God, how long can I keep that one running? We haven't even scratched the surface. the world of wine is truly remarkable, and the politics and the power plays and the stories behind it are just almost infinite. Just having so much fun putting together these stories. And we do a daily magazine show that we do live twice a week. We'll pre-record 3 of them. We've shot in 18 countries under lockdown by using stringer crews. And we genuinely are having a great time putting together a remarkable array of programs, all based on the story of wine. And the great thing is that the club itself, 67 Pall Mall, has got such a good reputation in the wine world. All the great houses that we've approached, the great vineyards, the names that you all instantly recognise as being, the Grand Crus of the world. And we say who we are, they say, sure, come on in. We like what you do. We're pleased to have you come and shoot with us. So it's actually been exciting. I mean, if anyone said that we could launch a 4K television channel within 6 months and keep it on air during a pandemic, I would have said you're having a bit of a laugh, aren't you? But because we didn't stop to think about it, we actually went and did. And I've just been asked to help set up the Singapore studios because the club opens in Singapore in February. So there's more to come.
How's the channel distributed then? We
go through Red Bee, and it's an internet channel, so it can be seen free to air. It can be seen throughout the world. And we've been seen we tried to work it out the other day, but we've been seen in a lot of countries so far. But all the wine-growing countries sort of tune in. But it's just a free-to-air wine television channel supported by sponsorship and advertising.
Okay, well, I'm going to have a look at that. And there's obviously lots of perks with being involved in that, Richard.
Well, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it, I guess.
After we finish our chat, I'll be on you to try and get a visit into Pall Mall just to make sure that what you're saying is true.
I say with pride, it's the only channel I've ever worked on that's got its own sommelier. We actually do.
I could talk about this all night, I'm sure, but we better move on. So, Secrets of the Imperial War Museum. So you mentioned that was a production that you oversaw during lockdown. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been working with the Imperial War Museum for, it frightens me to say, but decades now, mainly as an amazing archive resource. But also I used to help sponsor their film festival. I used to judge their film festival. So I've always admired what they've done. And everyone I've ever taken to the Imperial War Museum walks through the doors and goes, oh, it's not what I thought at all. Because they've been so creative and so imaginative about the way they have their galleries and they display things, that they say themselves that the only 2 things that they have a problem with are the names Imperial and War. But that's kind of engraved above the door, because it's not all about, guns and, who won and, the great battles. It's a really insightful look at people in times of conflict. And I always admired them. And when lockdown 1 hit us, I was wondering, what could we do? And I dropped a note to the Director General and said, you're closed. We haven't got anything else on. Could we come and try and get a series off the ground? And she got straight back in touch and said, what a good idea. Channel 5 immediately picked it up very quickly. And we spent, about just over 6 months of shooting, end of last year and the beginning of this year, putting it all together, which was tough. I think it's probably one of the hardest shows I've ever execed on, because you couldn't sit in a room with anybody. One of my directors I met for the first time about 4 weeks ago, 2 weeks after we delivered to Channel 5. I've spoken to him 100 times on Zoom, but I'd never been in the room with him. I missed that enormously, that whole sense of just sticking your head in the cutting room, around the cutting room door and saying, can we try this? Have you thought of that? What about doing it this way? Everything had to be booked in. It had to be, can we have a Zoom call about this? Can you send me, the link? Then can we have a Zoom call about that? I found it tough. I'm very pleased with the results, but it was hard work getting there. And not only that, for Chris Barkin, our series producer, almost everybody who appears in the film We had to get back off furlough. Furloughs had to be cancelled. We had to bring people in because the museum was closed. I think they had a working staff of less than 50 people at one point. We didn't want to produce a series that was specific to being in a pandemic. Obviously you see people wearing masks and a few things like that, but we never allude to the fact that this was a show shot in lockdown, because we wanted to have a shelf life of much more than that. The IWM were magnificent. They pulled out all the stops. They got people in. We arranged all kinds of things for us to do. I don't think you really notice, much as I'd love a little card at the beginning of the film saying, you wouldn't believe how difficult this was to do and how little money we got it for. I think it stands by its own merit. So I'm really pleased with it.
And the title is Secrets of the Imperial War Museum. What are the secrets then that you're revealing?
IWM has 33 million objects and about 28,000 hours of archive film. So and I think one of the things that people don't realise is they also look after HMS Belfast, Duxford Aerodrome, the IWM North and the Churchill War Rooms. So just the content alone is pulling things out of storage that they've got nowhere to put. Probably, I don't know what the percentage is, but probably 90% of the things that they have meticulously recorded and preserved rarely get to see the light of day. So we spent a lot of time delving into their storage rooms and helping discover new things. We looked at the story of there's been the famous Battle of the Somme film shot in 1916. There's been one guy they've been trying to identify. So we looked at how the work going on about trying to identify one of the people who appears carrying a wounded soldier down a trench. And they've had, I think, 90 different claims over the families that say that was my granddad. And they're bit by bit, they're whittling it down. And just the work they do is just so extraordinary about how they set things up. They've just launched a brand new World War II gallery and a brand new Holocaust gallery. It's taken, I think, about 5 years from conception to opening the doors on those. And it's looking at just the work that goes into putting one small object. You think, right, put that there, that there, that there. Oh, no. These things are meticulously mapped out, planned. How's the visitor going to experience it? Will they understand it? Which way should it be facing? So all of those internal secrets of running an amazing institution come out in the show. And half of it's run by unbelievably experienced curators and a lot of volunteers, and that really comes across. The people who run these things do it for the passion. They're certainly not, I don't think they're doing it for the money, but it is the passion for these incredible stories. And I think most importantly, what we really try to get across in the series is the museum's about personal stories, and it's about the people behind the objects. And I think that really comes across, what terrible things they were involved in, they saw, the heroism, just a million stories, 33 million objects, 33 million stories, I would say. Which is a brief pitch to Channel 5 to say, can we go back and do series 2?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got enough source material there.
Yeah, I'm working on series 15 at the moment, and I'm not running.
Well, it's quite interesting when we're talking about archive and we're talking about artifacts. Earlier on in the show, I was chatting to Cameron, who's a NFT technology expert, and we were just talking about non-fungible tokens and blockchain and how that was affecting or may go forward and affect the factual industry, not just factual, but content production and distribution going forward. Is that something that you might consider, do you think, non-fungible tokens and generating projects, crowdfunding them and distributing in that way?
Yeah, I've never said no to anything. I'm always up for the challenge. I'm curious, put it that way. Yeah, I think certainly crowdfunding has been a big asset, particularly if you're trying to get your first film off the ground. Whether having a personal key to my unique film that only I can see is the way forward. Most of the things that I make, I hope get seen by millions. I haven't ever made a film for a small person who can pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
I don't think you should reject anything. Yeah, I'm all in favour of people who just go and get something funded. Anything you can do to get your film off the ground is okay by me. Andre and I made a film with the Imperial War Museum, which is one of the reasons I got to know them so well, about the liberation of the concentration camps that we did in 2015. And it was about a film that they had in their collection that was unfinished. So they were trying to finish it because it was made in 1945, all shot obviously in black and white, and it contained some really tough graphic footage of the liberation of Bergen-Belsen and Dachau and various things like that. I must have been told, I can't even begin to count the number of times I got told, you're not going to fund that, it's black and white, it's about the concentration camps, I wouldn't bother if I were you. That spurred me on even more to go, no, I'm going to get this funded. And I think in the end we had 7 separate funding partners, all of whom were putting in various amounts of money, all of whom wanted editorial control. So it wasn't the easiest show to put together. But in the end, we went off and he said he modestly won an Emmy for it. So I'll do anything. Anything, let's say, mainly legal, I will do to get something funded if I believe in it. And I'm all in favour of, if someone says, I'll do it through an non-fungible token, fine, I'm in. How do we do it? Go for it.
Content funding is changing seemingly week on week. We're hearing, lots of different models that distribution companies are launching, co-producing, but sort of co-producing in all but name, if you like, and commissioning their own content. And as you say, there's these non-fungible tokens and blockchain and various other routes to market. I mean, with all of these new funding pipelines, if you like, at the same time, we're finding perhaps commissioning is becoming a little bit more difficult. There are more hurdles to get your project commissioned. It sounds to me like there's actually more opportunities to raise financing.
Oh, completely. I think you actually put your finger on a crucial part of the industry at the moment. Even 10 years ago, if I'd said to you Netflix, you'd think, oh, those are the people who send DVDs, through the post. Now, every producer and director I meet says, do you think we could get Netflix interested? They've revolutionized, certainly factual program making. I was told throughout the vast majority of my career, people don't watch black and white. They don't watch anything with the subtitles on. Netflix has just blown that out of the water. They have Oscar-winning films in black and white. They have subtitles on anything. Squid Games. God, that's one of the most watched programs in the world. I watched it in Korean. It was much better that way with subtitles. So I love that. I think it's so exciting. We've worked for Netflix, Apple, HBO, and the fact is that they're prepared to take so much more of a risk and have the funding to do what they want to do. Certainly when I first started working with Netflix, they were, I think, willing to put a lot more money than they are now. And I recently worked with Apple Plus, and it was like working with Netflix in the beginning when they were putting money in, left, right, and centre, which we spent very wisely and very well. But it's a glory period where we're being allowed to do big shows that you couldn't possibly fund through a terrestrial broadcaster anymore, and just not be limited by the scope of the budgets, which we are so often these days if you're working for a one country, one broadcaster show. But even I go back to the days where people looked over their noses at me and told me that if the BBC wants it, they will fully fund it. So don't bother coming to me with a co-production. And now even the BBC is sort of co-producing left, right and centre. Channel 4's co-producing. Everybody's jumped onto the co-production bandwagon, including working with the SVODs, which I think is terrific.
It does seem like the SVOD, it's like an arms race, isn't it? For this tentpole factual content, also drama as well. Obviously, drama is on a different scale altogether. But when it comes to these big feature docs, I mean, we're about to see, for example, the Beatles 3-parter come out on Apple Plus at the end of this week, which is going to be amazing. Essentially an archive show, but obviously this must be the mother of all music archive documentaries. It seems that there's no shortage of great projects there that are being funded and that the big companies are really focusing on. But I wonder whether the middle ground of like mid-budget shows, are they getting squeezed? Do you think it's more difficult to get those sort of shows away now? I mean, for example, Prison, which was a remarkable series. It was really fantastic. And that was what we're talking about 4 years ago, aren't we? 3-4 years ago, that series.
And then we did a follow-up series in a woman's prison 2 years ago.
Do you think that would be commissioned in the same way now? Or do you think things have moved on for that sort of access documentary project?
No, I don't, because I'm in the middle of doing a 4-part series for Channel 4 that we had again commissioned in lockdown about a group of defence barristers in London. And we've been following them for, well, really since early April this year, and we're still filming with them. And that takes courage and investment by the channel. They've seen none of it yet, but we've been tracking with these amazing barristers who do everything from speeding fines to murder. It is all about having, A, the access, and B, the time to do it properly. Yeah, and you've always got to fight for those. I remember when I took Prison into Channel 4 and said, we need to film for 6 months. And Channel 4 said, that's a long time. Can't you do it in 3 months? And I said, no. And they hummed and hawed a bit and gave us the 6 months. And I think the success of Prison, apart from Paddy Wivel being a brilliant director and a great crew, was time. That's the one luxury I fight hardest for. I can take hits on the number of people, the camera equipment we use, where can we go to a post-production place with good coffee. All of those are variable fees. But for me, the real luxury in factual program making is time. Time to shoot it properly, time to disappear into the background so you can start getting stories that you can't get if you're only there for 2 weeks and things like that. When we did Prison, when we took the crew up there for the first time, they didn't have a camera with them for the first 2 weeks. They just spent 2 weeks hanging about the prison, getting to know people. And I would say we probably threw away, knowing we were going to do it, we probably threw away at least 75% of the rushes we shot in the first month, because the prisoners and the staff all knew there was a camera on them. A month after that, Paddy and the crew had just become part and parcel of the staff. They were wallpaper. I had to go back up towards the end of the shoot, and I had a meeting with the governor of the prison, and I said, I'm really sorry. I know I said we'd have the team out by the end of January, but can we have another 2 weeks because we really want to finish a couple of storylines? And he went, are they still here? Which I think is a huge compliment to them, because they've just been absorbed in and were part of it. And that's why we got such amazing stories. That still takes courage from a broadcaster who normally, by the time they got round to making the decision, then say, can we have it on air in 6 weeks? And it's my job to go, no, you can't have it on air in 6 weeks. Because they go, why not? And I said, well, we haven't started shooting would be one of the reasons. So it's less, there's fewer of them around, but that has been scooped up now, I think, by the SVODs, who are letting us do really challenging projects. The last thing I did with Werner, fortunately, we finished shooting just before the pandemic hit, but we shot in, I think, 11 countries. That takes, including the really 15 hours out into the outback of Australia to the Antarctic. Those things you can't do in weeks. You need months to be able to set those up and do them properly. That needs a broadcaster to believe in you, your idea, and giving you the financial support in order to do that.
I would imagine no broadcaster or no partner on a project that Werner Herzog's involved with would really push too hard to cut the budget. I mean, with his reputation...
You'd be surprised. I've never met a broadcaster who didn't try and cut the budget.
I can imagine he would give them rather short shrift, but maybe he's not actually holding these day-to-day conversations, I'm sure.
That's down to me and my team.
That was the Meteorite documentary, is that right?
Yes, we did that for Apple Plus. They were great. Funny enough, we got that initially funded, fully funded, in fact, with enough money to do it, partially through the help of Dogwoof, who were great. They came on board very quickly and put up money up front. And so we were able to start. I think we were about 3 weeks into filming when Apple suddenly came knocking on the door and said, yeah, we'll take it over. To everyone's relief, because we were right at the sort of, yes, we can just do it. The Apple came in and were great. Unsurprisingly, what was meant to be a 7-day shoot in Antarctica turned into a 21-day shoot because the weather closed in. When they got one plane in, it landed on the runway and cracked the ice, and they had to wait another 4 days for the ice to freeze over again so they could take off. So all of those little things come to haunt my dreams still from time to time.
I've got to ask you this, Richard, before we go into your story of the week, but what do you take from working with Werner Herzog? What's the main lesson you've learned from working with him?
Werner is one of the few people I've worked with who I genuinely believe deserves the credit that everyone asks for a film by. I think 99% of filmmaking is really a team effort. Everyone contributes to the making of a good film. When I'm working on a Werner Herzog film, I quite frankly say to people, what's it about? And I say, I don't know, I haven't seen the rough cut yet. Because he has a unique and original way of making films that nobody else I've ever worked with does. I'll get calls from the crew in Mexico and I'll say, how's the shooting going? And they say, well, we spent the day filming a starving dog walking up and down the street. Right, fine. Yes. I'm sure there's a reason for that. Wasn't in the schedule, but, let's just move on. And it's always about finding the unusual and the unexpected and coming at it from a different perspective. Don't expect the normal. That's what I've always enjoyed about working with him. It's been a real ride to find out what we're getting, what we're going to deliver. Yeah, and I genuinely don't know half the time what the films are really going to be about till I see the rough cut. And that's exciting.
We're on to Story of the Week now, Richard. So this is where you get to nominate your TV industry Story of the Week that's caught your eye in the past few days. What's your Story of the Week?
The most interesting and slightly nerve-wracking thing I've seen for the last few weeks has been the lack of film crew availability, film crew and equipment. Everyone has gone mad and is shooting everything simultaneously. And it's getting almost impossible to find crew that you want to work with who you can afford. Everyone's hiked their rates. I've got a good friend of mine who's doing a big drama at the moment. And two fairly senior members of his crew did 2 weeks on it before they disappeared off because they got poached by someone who was prepared to pay them 50% more. That's what's fascinating me at the moment, is what's going to happen over the next 6 months as we all start to battle. We're kind of in the middle of a perfect storm. We had pandemic for 1.5 years. No one was doing a lot of filming. Now it's all come swinging back in and everyone's filmed now. We're all working hard to achieve decent quotas in diverse representation. Brexit hasn't helped anything because we can't import equipment easily, or we can't bring over anybody from Italy to do anything anymore. So speaking as a producer, about the only people who can't raise their fees and ask for more money and better working conditions are the producers. I know we're not going to get a lot of sympathy on that side of things. But it really is an interesting time for the industry. Channel 4's just come out, I think, today and said that they're going to invest 15 million in training over the next 3 years, which is great. But it's going to take a lot longer than that before we start to get people, who can really do the job. I was very lucky. I came up through a really kind of boring traditional background, runner, clapper loader, focus puller, camera operator, DOP, all went right the way through the chain. And I value every single day I spent on location or in a cutting room to teach me my craft. I hate it when some person gets dumped in a show doing something that they can't really do because there's nobody else. And we've been terrible as an industry, truly terrible, about bringing on new people and training people because there's always been a supply and demand thing and there were enough people to do the job. But now when things have got busy, and it looks like they're going to stay busy for some time, we're building new studios, the workload's increasing, it's about time we really did pay attention to getting people trained properly to have great, enjoyable careers.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, there's more and more commissioning going on. There's more and more producing going on as this SVOD content arms race is going on. But equally, the likes of Netflix and other US studios are coming in and they're the ones that are inflating the market, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. UK broadcasters cannot compete, full stop. And we're being asked as producers to fight the rearguard action by us telling crew, no, we're not paying that because the broadcasters won't give us the money. I feel like I'm being punched in the head on both sides from time to time. No, we can't possibly pay that to an editor. Well, in which case I can't possibly get that editor. So you can't win.
No, and this is also fueling something that we're seeing more and more of, I think, is certainly a lot more complaints to organizations like Beck2 as well. First of all, if there's any bullying on set, clearly that is completely unacceptable and should never be taking place. But, there may be some of these cases where, as you say, some crew members are being parachuted in through necessities, through sheer desperation in some cases of some producers to do jobs that they're not qualified to do. And that causes stress right across the production process. So I guess that's fueling all of these issues as well.
Yeah, particularly for the person. I mean, when sadly in my career, the one thing that keeps me awake at night is when I have to let someone go. But when you do have to do that because someone has, let's put it kindly, over-egged their CV somewhat, actually it's a huge relief because there's nothing worse than trying to do a job that you're not qualified to do. As you say, Justin, it really echoes around the entire team when that happens.
Richard, we've got your hero of the week in Get in the Bin to do. So who's your hero of the week, first of all?
Okay, I'm now about to make a statement that I never thought these words would cross my lips, but I'm going for it.
All right, okay, here we go. You're giving this the big build-up, Richard.
My hero of the week is Paul Dacre. And the reason he's my hero of the week is that he's not going to stand for Ofcom. I am vastly relieved. To quote him, he has strongly held beliefs that he doesn't think would be compatible with Ofcom. Oh, I'm so pleased he's realised that. I think that would have been not a pleasant experience to have him heading up Ofcom. As I say, I never thought I would say Paul Dacre was a hero, but thank you for realising that you are totally incompatible with what Ofcom's trying to do.
You maybe didn't hear the crash when I fell off my chair when you said that, Richard, but I'm glad you qualified that afterwards. And who or what are you telling to get in the bin?
I'd like a what, if I may. I like to dump all of Friday night and Saturday night's terrestrial broadcast in the bin. I don't know whether it's me being a grumpy, well past middle-aged male, but I now automatically assume that from 7 o'clock on Friday to sometime on Sunday, there is going to be nothing for me on television, on terrestrial broadcasters. that's when I just thank the heavens for Netflix and Apple Plus. If I want to watch anything, I don't even bother to look at the schedules anymore. They've written me off as a viewer, so they're in my bin.
Yeah, right. Well, no, I mean, the SVODs are the part of the reason for that. But I absolutely agree with you. I don't know when I've last watched any live TV other than football.
Again, I'm old enough that I used to, on a Sunday night, I used to sit at home and think, right, what shall I set my VCR recorder to record over the week? And there would be at least 5 to 10 things that I wanted to watch during a week. And now I barely set anything. There's very little that I regard as a appointment of view.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can get it on a catch up later if I really want to see it. But I'm just missing those great television moments. I think maybe it's mists of time are blurring my vision, but I think there was a time when there was much more on television to look forward to than I think there is now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Richard, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with Secrets of the Imperial War Museum. I'm sure that'll be a big success.
Friday night, 7 p.m, Channel 5. Just get that in quick.
All right. Well, there we are. That is something to look forward to. There we are. I'll set my Sky Plus for that.
Thank you very much, Justin. A pleasure talking to you.
Well, that's about it for another week's TellyCast. As always, thanks a lot for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues. And why not follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next Thursday, as always, stay safe